Hi, I want to talk to you a little bit about worms. So I'm going to talk about an example of a worm, and the one we're going to use is the first worm written by Robert Morris in the 1960s, basically as part of his PhD program, I believe. So the Morris Internet worm actually brought down a large chunk of the internet back in the 1960s. Of course, the internet was much smaller then. But there were two basic parts to Morris's worm, and most worms these days have the same two parts. The first part is what's called a grappling hook. What this is used for is to try to find some way for the infected machine to grab onto and hold onto the target machine. So this is called a grappling hook. Once this has been attached, then the bad guys can upload the worm's made program from the infected machine to the target machine via the grappling hook. Basically, once a target machine has had the grappling hook installed, it's done, it's going to be infected. So the main program, once it's been installed on the target machine, is going to start looking for other computers to infect. The Morris worm used several techniques to try to do this. One is just looking for paired hosts that don't require passwords. So these are ones using what's called a remote shell. Don't worry if you don't know what that means. Basically, it's just looking for another computer that it can easily infect. It also used what's a fault in a utility called Finger. What Finger does is checks to see whether or not another computer is online and whether it's functioning. So basically, they use the Finger utility, Finger program, to ask for information, but they actually included a little payroll of 536 bytes that's meant to overflow the buffer and the stack frame and actually to call the shell. Once you've got the shell called on any computer, then you basically have control over that computer. We'll talk a little bit more about what buffer and stack frame overflow is very shortly. It also used a fault in SendMail, another utility program used to send mail, in order to actually execute the grappling hook program. Once active, the main program searched for passwords. If it couldn't find any passwords, or it found another computer wanted to infect, but it needed a username and password, it would try to guess passwords, first using no password, then using a password made up from an account name, some variation of the account name. Then they had a 432 list of favorite passwords. And then finally they would use the Unix dictionary, taking into account that most people use real words for their passwords, not made up words. With the Morris worm, if it found a copy of itself on a machine, it wouldn't infect it again, it would just exit, except for every seventh time. So what this means is every 7 times it infects a machine, if it already finds a copy of itself there, it'll put another copy of itself. Eventually, if it keeps on doing this, the target machine will run out of memory and it'll slow down and it'll crash. So this is the only way that they ever found out that the Morris worm was even out there, because of this little fault that he had in his program. Of course, he wasn't trying to do anything bad. He was just trying to see if this would work. So he wanted it to keep on infecting every 7th time so that he could be sure to be able to track it through the network. But again, the only reason why they ever found that the Morris worm existed was because of this little fault. If you were actually going to do this in the real world, and not just as part of some school project, then you wouldn't have this. You would always have it exit anytime it found a copy of itself to make sure that it's not going to overflow the memory of the target computer and be detectable. So this little diagram showing the Morris Internet worm. So we have the infected system on the right, target system on the left. So it's going to try an RSH, finger attack, a SendMail attack to try to gain access to the target system. As soon as it does, it's going to install the grappling hook. The grappling hook then is going to request the main program for the worm from the infected system, and then the infected system is going to send that worm back to the target system. Basically, once a grappling hook has been installed on the target system, the target system is going to be infected. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. So this is a typical worm. Modern worms work almost exactly the same way that this works.